You know he knows.
But he won't show he knows.
It was annoying because you take the line, you take Kipps's face, and you put them together, right?
And you just want to watch him die. Sorry. Very long night. Please tell me this tea.
Well, welcome back today to Haunting the Narrative. I'm Meg, and I'm here with...
Natasha! Woo!
Yes, and we're here today, just the two of us, to do a grab bag episode, which this is a topic I've been very just excited to do since the beginning. So thank you so much to everyone who sent us questions for this episode. You guys had so many great ideas. So we're going to get to some of the questions that people sent in on social media today. And some of them are actually already on our list to do longer episodes about because we could not limit ourselves to a short amount of time to discuss the topics. So look forward to those.
And when she says on social media, we mean Tumblr.
It was all on Tumblr. Thank you to the people of Tumblr.
We put this question out on like Instagram, Twitter, and Tumblr. And Instagram gave us a couple of likes, Twitter gave us a couple of likes, and Tumblr gave us like 500 questions.
Yes.
About 400 of which we already had episodes planned for. So I love the fact that we're all sharing just one brain cell in this entire fandom.
Yeah. Yeah, it was good validation. So thank you so much for that feedback. We really do appreciate it because podcasting is a bit weird because we talk a lot amongst ourselves and then we like put episodes out into the void and we're kind of like, what do people think? So it's so nice to hear from you all.
And if you want to be part of the bigger conversations, come join Tumblr because we put episodes out on Tumblr and then we get like people writing essays in response. It's brilliant.
It's very fun. Okay. Well, without any further ado, let's dive into our first question, which is what genre is Lockwood and Co? And I have many thoughts about this.
I have no thoughts about this. What is genre? Genre is a psychological social construct.
Yeah, I mean, it's a social, it's a marketing construct, really, in this day and age, to sell books. And usually when I've seen Lockwood and Co. in bookstores, it is like in the children's middle grade section, and it is usually grouped with fantasy books. Mm-hmm. But I feel very strongly that Lockwood and Co. is a true young adult series. Mm. So usually books are sorted into one or two of those categories by the ages of the main characters. Mm-hmm. And Lucy is, we discussed her age before in the timeline episode, but we are fairly certain she is 14, at least when the books start. Lockwood and George are 15. By the end of the series, that would make Lockwood 17. Like, these are not what we would call middle grade students or middle school students in the U.S. Like, they are what we would call high school students. So Natasha's thoughts.
I do have thoughts. One is that since Scarlet and Brown came out, I've seen Lockwood and Co. actually in the YA section in bookstores here now.
That's where I think it should be. That's where I always think it should have been.
Yeah. And it sends me to the dictionary so many times. I'm like, how can you say this is marketed for 9-year-olds? It's...
Right, exactly. Like, and maybe this is somewhat a difference between American middle grade versus British middle grade, but the vocabulary is so advanced compared to similar middle grade series that are published in the U.S. And I think the themes are more advanced. I think middle grade students can read these books, of course, but I really feel like they are true YA and they deserve to be grouped as such.
I mean, the writing itself, because I just picked up... Eleanor's got these new books called Wild Lord, which are quite good. But I just picked them up and started reading it. It's a great book. But the sentences are much shorter. The construction is much simpler. And it's like you read it and you think, oh yeah, this is definitely a book that was written for children. It's written in a way that children can easily understand and roll with it. Okay, it doesn't make it any less compelling or anything, but it's definitely for kids. Whereas Lockwood and Co., like, you read it and it's not written for kids at all, really, is it? It's the norm. I mean, it's better prose than a lot of like books that you see aimed at adults. It's very complex constructions, and yeah, it doesn't. Well, I was talking to Eleanor actually. Eleanor's my daughter, if anybody doesn't know.
And she's 10 for the record.
And we were talking because she started getting books out of the YA section at the library, and I actually have to sign a parental override for her so that she can get these books out. And she's asked me, what's the difference between YA books and older books? Because obviously I'm reading Lockwood and Co, which is in YA, so why am I a grown-up reading this? And I keep thinking about it, and the only thing that I can really think, and of course I didn't say this, actually, how many children listen to this podcast? Okay, let's say there's no heavy kissing scenes in YA books. That's about the only difference that I could think of.
And you mean in middle grade?
YA.
Oh. YA usually can have kissing.
Yeah, the more. It doesn't go past, basic first kiss kind of thing, does it?
Yeah.
Whereas adult books always just seem to have one slammed in there now for no particular reason. It's just like, hello, this is a book for grown-ups, so clothes must come off. At some point, I don't know.
No, but it is an important distinction because, like, in true middle grade books, you usually don't get any kissing, which, as we've discussed in the Lockwood episode, we also got no kissing in Lockwood and Co. But frequently in YA books, you will get one kiss.
Yeah.
You'll get like a little bit of something. So anyway, but yeah, it's an interesting thing to parse through. Like if I had to quickly summarize what I think the genre is of Lockwood and Co., my short answer is that I think it's a YA fantasy book. But my long answer is that I think it's a YA supernatural urban fantasy with elements of mystery and dystopia. Because it's not a fantasy. I think a lot of people, when they hear fantasy, still think of like high fantasy. So like Lord of the Rings. Yeah. And it's definitely not that. Like, this is a modern urban fantasy, and the supernatural, like, paranormal elements are obviously so important. This is a book about ghosts at the end of the day. And we don't have, like, other kinds of creatures or other sort of fantastical elements. So that's why I like that clarification. And obviously, I think we talked a little bit about in the pod about, the influence of Sherlock Holmes and other mystery stories. Like, these are mysteries, too. Like, they're not just fantasy. And, the society that these characters live in is very much dystopian in many ways, even though that's not the main focus like you would get in a book like The Hunger Games. It's got these other elements that are part of it as well, but it is there in the background, I would say. Yeah. So that's my very long answer to this question about the genre, but I hope I will see it moved into more YA shelves in the future, because I think that would also give it the broader audience that it deserves.
Very nicely said. Get Misty, put some applause in.
Let's move on to our next question, and this is a super fun one, I think, which is smell a talent? What are your thoughts?
In the red room, he is flipping out over the smell before the drops of blood start. He's like, I can smell that. It's something sour. It's sour and sweet, and it's got this tang. And it's kind of familiar, but I can't place it. What is it? What is it? How can you not smell it? It's so strong. And you just think, wait, what?
Yeah, and we don't hear it mentioned that explicitly many other times in the books, but if you go back to the glossary at the end, which we were flipping through right before this episode, it does talk about how manifestations can frequently include smells. Like, that is kind of another piece of the puzzle for agents as they seek to, like, identify what is happening, and they know that an apparition is about to appear, sometimes because smell is part of that. It does not seem like it is as predictable, though, or as universal as the other talents.
It does seem that Lockwood's got it more than the other two, though, doesn't it?
Which is interesting, because he doesn't have any touch, but he has smell, and Lucy never really talks about it as strongly as he does. Maybe that's part of the reason we don't hear about it as much, because we just get her point of view, and Lockwood's maybe smelling all kinds of things.
So my take on this is that really kind of psychic talent it can be divided into two. One type of talent is the type that sees what's already on this side of the veil, and one type is the type that reaches beyond the veil to make a connection with the ghost itself. So I would say something like sight or smell would be more on this side, and the other side would be like listening and touch, which, because Lucy's always talking about her listening lets her know this, her listening, but she's not actually hearing most of these things. It's just a connection and a feeling, you know. So I kind of wonder if that's it, and he doesn't have any of that emotional connection side. He's just on this side, but then he's like learns how to use his sight, like how to engage his sight, and his sight seems to get stronger as the books go. Obviously it's not talked about much, so maybe he does kind of learn to push it past the veil, in which case everything I just said is completely moot.
But I think that idea is fascinating. I don't know if I've ever heard you say that before, that like there's talents up for this side of the veil and then on the other side of the veil.
Because what I think, like when we see Lucy like in the Hollow Boy, right, and she's learning how to talk to ghosts, she just kind of opens it up and lets them make the connection on their terms. And that really screws her up because they kind of ghost lock her without her being aware of what they're doing. And she kind of gets almost tossed around on the waves in a way. She just kind of goes along with what they want. But by the creeping shadow, she's the one reaching out to make that connection and forcing that connection on her terms. You know, isn't she? So that's kind of, and the thing with Lockwood and his sight, like in the Screaming Staircase, he can't see Annabelle Ward's face until she lifts it herself. She lifts the veil, right? But then in the third book, in The Hollow Boy, he can see through the veil.
Right.
On that veiled woman. He can see her face. She doesn't want anyone to see it, but he can see it. Yeah, I think he's actually actively reaching through. So not just what the ghost is manifesting on this side, what the ghost wants to show us, but he's, you know, reaching through and forcing it.
Fascinating. Yeah, I have to say, though, I don't think I would want to smell ghosts. I think that is probably very unpleasant. And if we're going to talk about smell, I think we also have to talk about taste because, you know, we know, just like science tells us, that so much of taste is really our smell. So if you can't smell, and I mean, anyone who's ever had a bad cold or COVID knows that when you lose your sense of smell, everything tastes bad or it doesn't taste as good as it usually does. So if you can smell ghosts, that would perhaps imply that you can taste ghosts, which sounds horrifying.
I mean, Marissa said she was drinking it.
Oh, it's so bad. It's so bad. But I do have to call out here while we're talking about taste, the moment in The Hollow Boy when Lockwood is like just like swiping salt off the stairs at Winter Garden and like tasting it. It's like a very feral child move. It's like, you don't know what this is, what this substance is. Like, what are you doing? And everyone kind of just lets it slide, but like, that's weird.
Yeah, that is weird.
That is very weird.
But imagine like if there was plasm mixed up in that and then he got ghost touched on his tongue.
Right. Well, that's the other thing too. I'm like, I don't know. They need mothers. They need mothers to keep them from doing these things. Okay. Well, that is our thoughts about smell, I think, for now. We might have more in a future episode where we get more into talents. I would not be surprised. But we want to talk about one of, I think, Natasha and I's favorite characters from Lockwood and Co. Next, which is Sykes. Our one Nigel Sykes, Gravedigger Sykes. Gravedigger is obviously the cooler way to refer to him. And kind of how the timeline of his life and his death fit in with the books, which I know Nat has a lot of thoughts about.
Oh, well, somebody asked me about this on Tumblr when we did the timeline episode. So I had to actually dig through all my notes and create notes and figure out, you know, roughly when he would have died. So we can work it backwards, roughly. Okay, so Lucy moves in May. George moved in a year before that, so May the year before. Okay? Lockwood got his grade 4 the same year because he said he got qualified the year before, right? Okay? Which means that we're assuming that George doesn't move in until after Sykes is dead. Right? Because I guess that's when Lockwood's like, okay, I'm going to open up my own agency. Embassy, yeah.
Very different job.
But he's opening up his own agency. Sykes is dead. Okay, so that's at least May. And then he got his grade 4 that year, which presumably was from Sykes. So let's say that happened at least in January. You know, so he must have died like between February and April. You know,
at least, if not earlier.
He couldn't have died that much earlier. because he had to
How
sign the
much of it,
certificate
but-
for Lockwood. Yeah,
true.
so he's got to be alive for a couple of days that year at least. But
Yeah.
it's only about a year-ish. It's only about a year-ish, so it's quite fresh. Sykes is a very interesting character as well, isn't he? Because, like, Lockwood says that he's a thorn in the bum of Rockwell and Fitz. Flo loves his independence.
He says he's a real cool character, I think is the exact words.
See, I was thinking about that, though, because Lockwood's leadership style is he listens to everybody, or he tries to. Okay, especially when he's on the field. Let's talk about Lockwood on the field. He listens to people. He's got great control of his emotions on the field. And he's very, very, very encouraging and supportive.
Yes,
and generally, like we see this with Lucy as well in The Creeping Shadow, when she's leading those teams that she's freelancing with, she acts like Lockwood. That's what she's doing, because we copy the people that we learnt from, right? So one could presume, one could conclude, I'm forgetting how the hell to speak English. There's a better word from this, okay? There's a better word. We can conclude? I don't know, we can deduct that Sykes was very similar.
We can deduct, we can surmise.
Surmise, there we go, that's what I wanted. But we can surmise that Sykes was very similar. He was very encouraging, he was very attentive, he listened to his agents. He was obviously had a big thing about controlling his emotions, because that 5-year-old boy that we see in the apple tree who's all over the place, and Lockwood when he's 15, very, very, very different people.
Right.
But none of that kind of jives with the idea that most people have of Sykes, either that he's a very gruff and burly and older person, basically Barnes with a big sword, or like my personal one is that he's a 20-year-old who's running about just causing problems. None of that really jives with how we see Lockwood act, because you can assume that Lockwood sort of learnt his leadership. He's emulating Sykes when he's leading his team. It's just, he's very, very interesting. There's hardly anything on him in canon at all. But he's very much haunting the narrative, isn't he? He's only been gone for, he's only been in the ground for a year when Lockwood meets Lucy.
Yeah. We have to get at least one mention of haunting the narrative in at least every episode if we can. And Sykes is our contender for this episode. But yeah, he's there because Lucy doesn't even know that he exists really until the Hollow Boy. And then Lockwood provides very little information about him. But considering that he is the one, who found Lockwood after Jessica died and trains him, he is so important to the kind of leader that Lockwood becomes, to the, creation of the agency. He probably was a big feature and also giving Lockwood his independent streak. It's very likely that, maybe if Lockwood hadn't been trained by Sykes, maybe he would have very different opinions of Fitz and Rotwell. But as it is, he feels very strongly that they maintain their independence.
Well said. There is a very interesting fanon theory going around about Sykes. And that is, well, let me put it this way. Nowhere in any of the 5 books does it ever say that Sykes is not a Texan.
And by the theory that has gone around, Natasha means that I think the two of us came up with this one night on Discord. I think we're maybe the only people that's dedicated to this theory. But
I think that we can blame Yami and a few other people as well.
Yeah, we probably can. Con Yam artist on AO3.
Yeah.
Thank you for your contributions to this theory. But I love the idea of Texas Sykes. I love the idea of a man in blue jeans and a big hat trying to walk around with a flask of whiskey in his pocket, which he could be British and still be doing that. But
shotgun on his back, it doesn't work against the ghost, but he's going to be damned if he's ever going to put it down. I can't do a Texas accent, someone else do it.
Not me. Even I might be American, but I will tell you this much: I am not from Texas.
I used to live in Texas, actually.
Oh, I don't know if I knew that about you.
Go.
You've lived everywhere.
I was about 4 years old and I got myself kicked out of daycare. I don't remember much else.
It's very on brand for you, I feel like. Anyway, we are very pro Texas Sykes. Mm-hmm. Please feel free to include it in your fix. We would delight in that.
Come on, you could see it. A man with 10-gallon hat on, sitting on a gravestone, roasting marshmallows over a campfire in the middle of a graveyard with like 11-year-old Lockwood.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, as someone who owns a pair of cowboy boots, they would be very practical for this kind of work. They're comfortable, they're durable, they can get dirty, they can handle all kinds of things. Like Lucy has her combat boots, but they could be cowboy boots. I'm just saying.
Mm-hmm. And also, Sykes being American would really explain why Fitz and Rockwell hated him.
That is incredibly true. Oh, yeah, because I think our other part of this theory at one point in time was that he was like a veteran, and he was basically like, I'm going to go to the UK and help them fight ghosts, and like he was like, had a military background, so I feel like that really fits in. Okay, that is one of our favorite little fan-in theories, but there are a lot of other ones that we've gotten asked about and that we have thoughts about, so we want to go through. And one of the first one is really about neurodiversity in canon. Like the most common theory about that, I would say, is autistic George. And probably the second runner-up is Lockwood has ADHD. So as far as George, I think that we can officially say that that is canon, actually. I've listened to some interviews with Stroud where he said, particularly with the way that George is portrayed in the show, like it was never necessarily... He never necessarily wanted to come out and say that George was autistic or on the spectrum, but that was very much always how he imagined him, and he felt like the portrayal on the show really accurately got to that part of his character. So I don't really even consider that fanon. To me, that is like true.
Yeah, it does. It does seem very canon, doesn't it?
Yeah. I think it's a hard one to dispute, especially when the author has agreed.
ADHD is a harder one, and I say this as somebody who, my psychologist, after doing my diagnosis, called me up and said, "You have the highest score I have ever seen," and that's not in a good way. Okay? But the problem with ADHD is a lot of ADHD symptoms also overlap with PTSD, particularly CPTSD, which is when it's not just one traumatic event, it's many traumatic events over a very long time. Which I think it would be very difficult to argue, that an agent doesn't have CPTSD. That just people living their normal lives in England during the problem, they're probably all a bit messed up in the head, really, because, you go outside to put the bins out, you might die, and you don't know because you can't see, hear, smell, feel, you can't sense anything. You're just dead on the pavement. That must be incredibly stressful.
Incredibly. I'm stressed out just hearing you say that.
But I do think from the apple tree, the way that Stroud describes Lockwood's family is, honestly, it's quite an ADHD family in many ways. You've got Lockwood running about, just, he's got energy fizzing out of his nerves, along his skin, all of this. And it's, okay, yes, it's very much 5-year-old boy, but also if you have children who are ADHD, when you take them out with children who aren't ADHD, you discover that children are actually supposed to get tired at some point. Meg is laughing here, but honestly, this is like, it is absolutely wild when I see kids that my kids aren't related to, and it's like, oh, why are they tired? Well, because they've been running about for 4 hours. I'm like, yeah, so my kids are still bouncing off the bloody walls. And that's just how it is. But also the fact that, like, his parents are so distracted. They're so into their research. They're so distracted. And that is also very much, ADHD is hereditary, by the way. It's very much an ADHD thing in that you tend to kind of drop things. It's kind of hard to keep, like, an equal awareness of everything that you need to be balancing in life. You tend to drop threads here and there. And obviously, if the children are mostly well looked after by the nanny, and this is supposed to be super important, they're going to be constantly distracted with it rather than being able to balance it out. So I think there's a decent, just aside from the way that, like, Lockwood acts in canon as well, he's constantly flipping from one thing to the next. He's, surprising people with his mood changes. He's got so much energy. Like Lucy even says, like, his energy draws people in. And yeah, and he's just go, 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 go,
so much energy.
So aside from that, I do think the apple tree actually backs up that theory a bit, that Lockwood very much probably has ADHD. So I think that's not a bad one, really. I actually think I wouldn't say it's as canon as Autistic George, but I say there's a decent argument for it in canon. The other ones, what else is there? I mean, people always like to give like Lucy autism or ADHD or both. No?
Yeah, I think a lot of people want to diagnose like all the characters with some thing or another, but the one thing I feel very strongly about, as Natasha has already said, is that I think every character in these books has PTSD or CPTSD. Why can't I say that acronym? You know what I'm trying to say. And I think that's incredibly obvious. And I think we want to do a deeper dive at some point down the road into mental health in Lockwood and Co. and talk about that. But I mean, it's quite obvious that Flo has pretty extreme PTSD based on her experience. Lucy exhibits the signs. Lockwood exhibits the signs. George, not so much. I mean, they are going through traumatic events daily. It would be, I do not think there is a single agent in this universe who makes it out without PTSD. It's very much similar to being in any kind of active combat. It's, these two things almost always go hand in hand, unfortunately.
I will say something though, what I was saying earlier about Lucy, ADHD, autistic, about, it doesn't really matter if you're into fandom and you're writing fic, it doesn't matter what's canon or not, you just have fun with it, okay? And I know that a lot of people like to write characters as more neurodiverse than maybe they're presented in canon, because it's relatable, and writing is a way that people can work through their own struggles, their own daily life, and it helps you process. So if that's your headcanon or if that's what you want to go with it. It's enjoyable to read, it's enjoyable to write, and that's what this is all about. It's fun.
Truly. And I mean, none of the things that we're saying today are set in stone. These are 100% pretty much just our, well, I mean, almost everything we say at the podcast, except for like when we directly quote the books, like these are our opinions.
Yeah.
And
apart from Sykes, he's from Texas, okay?
But to kind of just add to that, I think this also brings up a good point that like we just need more diversity and representation in books in general. So writers out there, write characters the way you want to see them. So
on the subject of things that we want to see, there is a ship that is very, very, very popular.
I don't know if I would say it's very popular, but it
seems to be a bit like Marmite. Do you know what that means?
Yes, it's that weird thing you guys eat in Australia that everybody else is like, no.
No, Australia's Vegemite.
Oh, Vegemite. Oh, Marmite is the British one.
I feel very offended that you say Marmite's the British version because I think our one came first, but we might have come
It's
first.
the British one. It's the British one.
It's the British one. Yeah. It's the meat one, I assume. Ooh. I don't know. Anyway. So Marmite, the ad for Marmite is you either love it or you hate it.
Yeah.
And there's this ship that gets written quite a lot. And it's quite funny for me because I've kind of got two circles of friends in fandom. And one circle absolutely loves this ship, and the other circle absolutely hates this ship. So on the one hand, I've got like everybody in this group chat writing this ship and talking about how much they love it and getting all excited about it. On the other one, I've got them all reading these fics going, but I hate it. It's so weird.
Well, okay. We've built it up way too much. So the ship we are talking about is Quill Kipps and Jessica Lockwood. Just to put that out there, now that we did all that build up about in drama, which I am team I love Quill and Jessica. However, I also fully acknowledge there's almost no evidence for it in canon besides the fact that they're about the same age and that Kipps makes a couple of comments that could be, if you really stretch them, they could be potentially construed that he knew Lockwood's family.
I mean, he makes one comment, doesn't he? What does he say?
It's really just one comment.
In the Screaming Staircase says, let me find the quote.
So we found the quote in the Screaming Staircase where Kipps, it's implied that Kipps potentially knew more about Lockwood's family. And this is the quote. Quill starts out talking to Lucy. "You ought to watch out being with Tony, sweetheart," Quill Kipps said. "His last assistant came to a nasty end." I smiled blandly. "Don't worry about me. I'm fine." "Yeah, but bad things happen to people he's close to. It's always been that way, since he was ever so young." He tried to make it sound casual, but his tone betrayed him. There was a catch in his voice that I didn't understand. I glanced across at Lockwood. The way he stood was different. His studious unconcern had stiffened, become something harder and less pliable. I knew he was about to say something, but before he could speak, George stirred. So that is basically the entire quote that the potential relationship between Quill and Jessica is based on. But, because it does sort of imply there that he knows about Lockwood's past, and he knows about Jessica, and he knows that Lockwood has lost people. And
that he's upset about it.
Yes, and that he's upset about it. So maybe they were just friends, but isn't it also interesting to imagine what kind of romantic relationship they could have had? And so tragic, which is, I think, the appeal for a lot of people, myself maybe included.
It's just a tragedy.
It's a lot of tragedy. So, but that's all the evidence there is for it in the text. But I think it's an interesting one to think about.
That and the ages, isn't it? It's just that.
Yeah, that's really it.
And that little thing has spawned 45 fics.
45. Well, I wrote one of them, so there you go. Okay.
But the problem with that is that also Quill Kipps seems very gay to a lot of people.
Well, but Show Kipps asked Lucy out, so
Beard.
that, yeah. So I mean, there's the sexuality and sexual orientation of the various characters of Lockwood and Co. is a whole, I think, different debate that we maybe don't need to get into at this point in time.
I do like that so many Americans say Lockwood is very clearly gay when he's never shown as gay at all in the books, at least to me. But it's because he dresses nicely or whatnot. And whenever I see people discussing this, just in my head is just playing gay or European. The answer is unclear.
It's also a rule that in addition to saying haunting the narrative, somebody has to sing pretty much every episode, except it will never be me because I'm a horrible singer. But everyone else is a delightful singer on the pod. So
we're going to get a drunk one day before recording and make her sing.
No, I would never subject anyone to that. But yeah, I think I also do not headcanon Lockwood is. I do not share that headcanon. I see him as very straight, but that's a separate conversation, perhaps.
It doesn't mean it's not fun to write him as gay, though.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
there's all kinds of options. But while we're talking about sexuality, that is actually, I think, a good transition to another question that we've been asked, actually on Instagram. So thank you for the Instagram question, which is...
This is Lockwood's OJ. We need to say thank you to you for this one.
Yes, Lockwood's OJ, who wrote us a very good analysis of this particular topic, which is how would the problem impact teen pregnancy, potentially?
Teen pregnancy is quite a hard one, in a way, to kind of talk about, because I know this is another thing that people love to talk about on Vix and love to talk about on Discord and on Tumblr and stuff. And most of the people talking about it are American, because it is quite a prevalent social issue in America, and that is less true on this side of the pond. I think our teen pregnancy rates are lower. It's not in as many movies and TV shows and stuff here, whereas, yeah, if high school movies are to be believed, there's at least one pregnant girl in every class, which we know is an exaggeration, but that's kind of how it is in the media over there, isn't it?
Yeah.
It just explains why people want to talk about it. I tend to think, if anything, I mean, the problem would have made teen pregnancy rates probably lower, maybe. So the problem for our timeline we decided the problem really kicked off around 1970. Yeah?
Yeah.
About 1970, 1975 is when it really kicked off. Now, this is after the whole contraception revolution, where women got access to the pill.
Yeah.
So we've already got, sex education. We've already got access to birth control. And this was never as controversial in the UK as it still is sometimes in America. Okay? It's just kind of a matter of fact thing that, these things are available. And if they're available, you can use them. So I just don't see it being particularly, I don't see it being particularly like a huge problem either. And also, aside from Lockwood and Co, I think agents are quite closely supervised.
Yeah. They're not, the rest of them are not living in houses without any adults around. Like, that is only a Lockwood and Co. situation, most likely.
Yeah, so I mean, teenagers will be teenagers. They have stressful jobs. They're probably not as heavily supervised as they would be in a boarding school nowadays. But still, I mean, they all seem quite well educated. That's another thing that actually we haven't got on our list, but people seem to think, agents would be undereducated or something. But from what I can see, they're quite well educated, especially with like history.
Yeah.
And they're good at the research, which means they've got very good reading comprehension and stuff like that. So I don't think they would be uneducated when it comes to like sex and contraception and things like that either. I think that's probably, like we were talking about this earlier, and Meg said that agencies have an incentive to make sure that their agents are educated on this front. Because, if a girl gets pregnant, that's her off the field for about a year or so.
Right. And I mean, yeah, so I really think that this would not be a politicized topic the way it is in the United States. Like, I think agencies would probably give agents basic sex ed just because they feel responsibility to make them aware of certain things. I don't think it would be a big, like, formal thing, but I do think that it would maybe not, I don't think teen pregnancy would be as common as you might think. And I think that they also, I think sometimes you'll see in fics that, like, agencies require female agents to be on birth control and things like that. And I think that's maybe taking it a bit too far. But
yeah, that's very invasive.
I don't think teen pregnancies are that common.
Yeah, I don't think
Yeah, that's very dystopian.
The flip side of it as well is that, most agents are agents because they don't have any money. So they don't want to be out of the field for a year either. You became an agent because your family's got too many mouths to feed. Anyway, you become an agent, you go back home pregnant for a year. Now you've got more mouths to feed and one less person working. And agents make quite a lot of money for a short time, don't they? Until they're about 19 or 20, and then your talents are gone. So I think there's a very big personal incentive for at least female agents to make sure that they're protected.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, let's move on to our next question, which is a very different topic, and this is the British monarchy. So another kind of popular fanon theory is kind of hypothesizing about how the British monarchy behaves in the problem during the problem. Stroud never mentions the monarchy in the books at all, and never really addresses the royal family. But he never says that they're not around either. So I think most people assume that, the royal family has not been abolished and that the basic government of the UK is still continuing on as it is.
I was going to say that. The government's actually never mentioned either, are they? It's just DPRAC's the only thing that is mentioned. That's government agency. But that does make some sort of sense because it's about Lucy's experiences, and Lucy lives in that very small world of agents and agents.
Yeah. I mean, when I was 15, I was not that invested in what the government was doing. So I can't blame Lucy in that regard. But I think the kind of interesting thing, and the reason we wanted to talk about this theory, is that a lot of people do seem to think that the royal family would have left during the problem and perhaps gone to Canada or gone to another part of the Commonwealth. And I disagree with that very strongly. Like, this is the royal family who refused to leave during the... I wanted to say during the plague.
I'm pretty sure they were in London during the plague as well, actually. Yeah.
No, yeah, but during the Blitz is what I was trying to say. And I cannot imagine that they would leave because of the problem. If we're assuming that this is still, Queen Elizabeth, and she has not died of ghost touch, like, there's no way she would leave. I cannot imagine that she would leave.
Not. Absolutely not. Yeah, she would not be leaving because of the problem. They would be staying here. I mean, it was her parents that refused to evacuate during the Blitz as well. They would go around, because everybody's houses were obviously getting bombed, they would go around to survey the damage and talk to the people whose houses have been blown up. And a lot of the time they'd be out talking to people. It was a way of like boosting morale,
Right.
And the sirens would go off and they'd have to run into a police station shelter And at one point, the Queen said, "I think that we've sat in every single police station in the East End by now." Because
Right. These are not people who would abandon. Like, they would not leave. And especially, I mean, from what I know about, Prince Philip, he also does not seem like the type who would go quietly during the problem.
Not. No.
He would get a huge sword and, walk around with it, I feel like. As my very American opinion.
I mean, they're all very proud of serving in the military, aren't they? They're all very proud of serving in the military, like actively serving as well. This isn't ceremonial. Prince Philip, who is the current king's father, was actually an officer in the Navy. And they did live in Malta, which is another place I've lived. So if the Queen went anywhere, she would go back to Malta. I don't think she'd go to Canada. But yeah, wasn't actively in the army, in the Navy. The Queen was in the Women's Land Army during the Second World War, so she was out fixing trucks and things. I don't know what her kids did. So like our king and his generation, I actually don't know, but they all have military uniforms.
They have honorary military positions. I don't know that, I can't remember if Charles ever served, but William and Harry both did.
Yeah, Harry actually went to Afghanistan as well. So Harry was fighting in Afghanistan, and William was in the Coast Guard for quite a long time. He flew helicopters and rescue missions and things like that. So yeah, this is not the kind of family that's going to turn tail and run.
No, very much not. And I think it's, we talked a little bit about leadership earlier, and I think that really factors into this equation too. Like, it sets a bad precedent as a leader if you leave and you make other people deal with the situation. And so I can't imagine them leaving. However, I do imagine that they would have to leave many of their current residences, because like Buckingham Palace, all these other castles, and like all these other properties owned by the royal family have to be so haunted.
See, Buckingham Palace isn't that old.
Well, Buckingham Palace maybe not, but there's still some. But like
Tower of London's very haunted. Hampton Court is very haunted, but neither one of those are royal residences anymore, probably because they got sick of all the ghosts. Buckingham Palace, like, there are so many ghost stories about both the Tower of London and Hampton Court Palace.
Right.
But anyway, I will have to go into them in another episode if anybody wants to hear them. Because I like talking about those, they're fun. Buckingham Palace is actually quite new. I think it's only about 100 or 200 years old. Not much has really happened to it because it was owned by some rich bloke, and then the Queen or the King of the day kind of took it over or bought it off them. I don't recall. Balmoral up in Scotland is another one that I like to go to a lot.
Yeah, they spend a lot
that
of time
one might
there.
be a bit more haunted because it's older, but also I don't think it's really been the site of any, of any real bloodshed or any reason for it to be massively haunted. Has it?
That we know of.
But that's the thing, we would have known about all of it, or most of it.
Well, and I mean, Balmoral, I think, could also be one of the places where an ancient battle could have taken place there.
Yeah.
And, you know what I mean? Like, there could be, digging out stuff. And, I mean...
They've got a lot of antiques, which I think could easily be sources. But then, the thing with Ghosts and Lockwood and Co. is that, okay, it's supernatural, but also... there are very mundane defences against it. You set up the lavender in the room, you've got some iron across the boards, you've got ghost wards in your bedroom, you're mostly fine. I'm sure all of their beds are made of iron. They've probably got a lot more iron decorations than gold and silver decorations. Well, actually, silver. Yeah.
Silver. They probably have a ton of silver. I imagine they do have an agency, on retainer, just in case they encounter anything.
I mean, they've probably got some of the younger princes in agency, don't they?
Well, yeah, that's an interesting question. If members of the royal family would have been allowed to become
some
agents.
of the spares, probably. Maybe not the direct line.
Yeah, no, not heirs. No,
Yeah.
definitely
William,
not.
no.
But
Harry, yes, because he's an affair baby anyway.
Okay, that's a separate
Sorry,
conversation.
I say this as somebody, Harry's actually one of my favourite in the royal family. As much as you can have a favourite in the royal family, Harry has always been my favourite. And everybody, when I was a kid, they were always like, but William's so much more handsome. And I was like, no, but I like Harry. He's better looking. And now, look, I've been vindicated. Thank you.
I will admit that I read Harry's memoir.
Oh, I haven't.
I have. I have. But yeah, I can see that, or like some of the cousins, not people who are directly in line to the throne. I could definitely see them becoming agents because, like we said, this is a family with, where military service is very important.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think it would be kind of crazy to read. Like, imagine if someone tried to assassinate the queen through like a source. Like, that would be crazy.
Ooh, that would be fun.
I bet they do keep agents around just to be like, just in case of threats.
The thing is, though, that people just don't feel that strongly about the monarchy.
Well,
we just don't care. They're just there. I mean, some people do, but really they need to get a life. There are more pressing problems that are closer to home that you can kind of deal with better. Yeah. So, I mean, would someone try and assassinate them? Nobody ever really tried to assassinate the queen. Some bloke...
Again, maybe I'm American. I'm like, that we
know
of.
One bloke broke into her bedroom. At one point, she woke up in the middle of the night and there was a guy standing in her bedroom and he just wanted to say hello to her or something, and it scared... Obviously, it was quite scary. But she's like, okay, well, off you go then. They beefed up security. They were worried that the IRA was going to, try and bomb her, especially because she always insisted on driving herself to visit her mother. And she absolutely refused to change the route or to be driven by somebody else, but they never got around to bombing her.
But maybe that's a good, actually, transition to another question we've been asked about, which is Irish unification, which I'm going to put my disclaimer here that we're talking about this without Mairead, who is the Irish member of the podcast. And I do not personally feel qualified to offer an opinion about this, but Natasha has one.
As a disclaimer as well, my grandmother claims that she has Irish blood and that her mother's maiden name was Finn. But her mother also wore saris, had very dark brown skin, and made a lot of curries. So I'm not quite sure how true that claim was.
I question it myself.
I'm slightly doubtful. But great grandma was lovely anyway. Anyway. Me and May actually have polar opposite opinions on this, which I find really funny, because you might think, listening to my accent, that I'm like, oh, all of Ireland is part of England. No, I think the Northern Irish would have done a sensible thing and said, oh, look, they've got ghosts over there. Sod that. We don't want anything to do with it. And gotten closer to Ireland, so Ireland will be unified by this point. Whereas Mairead just thinks that people are a lot less logical than that hatred runs too deep for that, and that's very unlikely. But Mairead kind of has a thing. I think somewhere deep in her heart, she really wants there to be ghosts roaming the Irish countryside, massacring her people. Because she's like, but all the famine graves, think about it. So for that purpose, Irish unification has to not happen. Which means that nobody's controlling what goes in and out the border for Northern Ireland. And Ireland also gets completely contaminated with the ghost plague.
Yeah, I mean, the famine graves, that would be an interesting thing to address.
Yeah, they're a lot more recent than most plague pits and stuff too, aren't they?
Yeah, I just personally have no horse in this race. I've got no opinion for one, so.
I do want to actually get Mairead to chat about this at one point, but it's quite a touchy subject in some ways. So I think proper research has to be done into it. But at the heart of the Irish problem is that there are people in Ireland who want to be Irish, in Northern Ireland, sorry. People in Northern Ireland who want to be Irish. There are people in Northern Ireland who don't want to be Irish. Though they've all went and got passports now after Brexit, haven't they? Anyway. But they want to be Protestant and not Irish, and this is extremely important to them. And I think those divisions just run extremely deep. Maybe too deep for ghosts to overcome.
Yeah, I think it's a very complicated topic. Like I said, so
I don't know.
More to come. Yeah. Let's go on to our next question, which kind of is our last kind of fanon related question, which is about the books, Lockwood and Co books being a kind of form of anti-capitalist messaging. And a lot of people, this is a big topic. I'm going to fully acknowledge, we're not going to discuss capitalism fully in this podcast, because that is what people do for their entire
There
jobs.
are millions of podcasts that discuss capitalism. we're not it, okay? We're the Talk Nerdy About a Book
We're
series
not it.
podcast.
Yeah. But that is a common lens through which I think people view this series. And I think there is some, I think, you can interpret literature in many different ways, and you can take that lens to view this series. But I know Natasha has some thoughts about that.
I do think that the anti-capitalist messaging is it's kind of another case of the neurodiversity thing, sticking a label on everybody because we're somewhat projecting because we want to process the world as that we're experiencing at the moment. But when you look at it objectively, the main character of the series is all about making money. That's Lucy, by the way. Okay, that's Lucy. She's trying to climb that ladder. You've got Lockwood, who is the second main character, the titular character of the series. And the fact that it's pronounced titular, not titular, always feels a little bit scandalous to me. It's just a bit
hate
scandalous. But the titular character he's a small business owner and a landlord. I'm not entirely sure that this is the anti-capitalist messaging you're hoping for. I mean, in a modern AU, it would be quite easy to write Lockwood as a crypto bro. Or he's got the tech startup,
That pains me. Yeah, I have talked to people before about writing a fic where Lockwood runs a tech startup. And it's got some elements of truth to it.
Kipps is the techno bro who then eventually loses all his money and joins the tech startup instead. There we go.
Yeah, there's a little bit of kernel of truth to that. I do think there are, implicit arguments in Lockwood and Co. that are critiques of capitalism and of capitalist society. And I think some of it actually is rather explicit when we're talking about what is the word I'm looking for?
Orpheus Society?
The Orpheus Society is one of them. I was trying to think, these are child laborers. We're, that is not a great side of capitalism. There is also an element of, all these companies and all these industries that make money off the problem. I think there are some real critiques of parts of capitalism in this series. I just don't know if it's maybe as sweeping as...
I always found it interesting that, the fight against the problem is being run by private companies. It's not being run by the government. But I do think that, and we are going to do an episode on class and Lockwood and Co, but in the context of this anti-capitalism idea, I actually think Lockwood and Co talks much more about class than capitalism as a system. Particularly because the agents are generally all working class. But every single villain in this series is new money. Okay, they're not the aristocracy. Yeah. They're not the monarchy. They're all people who maybe didn't come from nothing, but who run businesses, who work for a living, and got extremely rich off the back of the problem. And they are the baddies. The Orpheus Society is full of leaders of industry. Marissa Fitz was a middle-class woman from Kent who started to protect people who were trying to mitigate the problem that she caused herself. But, that's how she made her money. Rotwell was tramping about with her in the fields. That's not something that, someone who's living off generational wealth is going to be doing,
No. And that is established so early on in the books. It's established with Fairfax in book 1, who he is, making his money in iron because of the problem. This is not somebody who also, we get the sense that he's not come from generational wealth.
He's not
either.
Proper upper class because he's actually working, and that's where the money is coming from, the business that he's doing. If you're proper upper class, you might be working, but you don't need to. The money, I don't know where they get the money from. I suppose rent in some form or another, but
properties, investments. That's where the real money comes from. Compound interest, eighth wonder of the world.
Yep. When you're living off centuries of that, you don't need to be running an iron company.
Okay, this is a super fun question. This is from Lockwood's Rapier on Tumblr, which is, how do you think the government would react if the problem happened in current society? What similarities or differences to Lockwood and Co. would occur? I love this question. This is a super fun thing to dive into.
This really got the cogs moving, didn't it? It's like, ooh.
Yeah. Right. So basically what would as we talked about, the problem really kicks off around 1970. Let's just say that. So if we're going to fast forward 55 years into the future, how would current society react to this outbreak of ghosts?
So I know that you have quite a few thoughts on that. So do you want to share your thoughts first? Because I'm still kind of marshalling mine.
Yeah, so I guess I have less opinions about how the government would react because I am less familiar with the modern day British government, even though I do love Larry the cat, the cat of number 10 Downing Street. But I think that we really saw with the pandemic that there were so many conspiracy theories and so much bad advice online that I think the internet conspiracy theories about the problem would be insane. I think they would be absolutely unhinged. I think there would be a million Reddit forums dedicated to this. I think there would be a million YouTubes about this. I think there would a million YouTube videos about this. I think there would be so much bad advice, so many bad things that people are tossing around about ways to ward off ghosts that don't actually work. And I think the ghost cults would explode even more than they do in Lockwood and Co. I really think the internet would be very dangerous in the problem universe.
TikTok and challenge. Who could get ghost touch first? Yeah,
there would be weird things going on TikTok. I would fear for that scenario even more than the scenario in the books.
I think it's very interesting to think about, because when you say how would the government react if the problem happened in current society right now, you have to remember the problem started very, very, very slowly. It was unusual deaths here and there. It took about a decade and a half to really kind of ramp up to a noticeable point. But even at that point, it wasn't anywhere near as bad as it is in Lucy's London. When the problem was officially recognised, it wasn't big enough a deal to take control of those private agencies and make them the government. There was no need to create a division of the army or a division of the police to deal with this. They just left it in the hands of the agencies. And I think part of that was because Marissa and Tom had the proprietary knowledge for fighting ghosts or whatever that was. But obviously then they wrote the manual, all of this. So they could have, if it was a thing where there were a dozen haunted houses on every street, you would expect the government to step in and set up an actual education system, a training system, like UPRA at the end of the books, how DPRAC is now running the biggest agency. But that didn't happen. And I think that in current day, it would kind of follow the same path, except it would be, as you say, the internet would just make it worse, because you'd have things being very, very, very divisive. At first, there's going to be this circle of people who are just panicking and trying to connect the dots on all these random deaths. But it's not all these either, is it? It's a couple here, a couple there, a couple here. It's very hard to say. I think... Right. I mean, the whole child labour thing, a lot of that's just necessity. The night watch is necessity. It has to be kids. The agents are kids because they have to be kids.
Yeah, there's no way around that.
People talk about well, couldn't they wear the silver cloaks? Couldn't they wear the armour? And you have to remember that even when they have the spirit capes, and they know what the spirit capes do, Lockwood doesn't start wearing them on cases. No, Lucy says that standing behind the iron chains blocks her talent. It makes it harder to do your job, to actually solve the haunting. It might protect you from the ghost, but it makes it harder to stop the ghost being there, which ultimately is what protects you more, right? So I don't think that there'd be all of this armour produced for agents in a modern day. I think the agency scene would look much the same. I don't know, it would be hard because all of London, all of the UK, all of our steel production is overseas. All of our mines have been shut for decades and things like that. So it would be a lot harder. China would be having a field day. Yes, let us sell you all of this.
Right. The industry behind the problem, I think, would maybe be even larger than it was in Lockwood and Co. And
it would be, but most of the money would be going overseas instead of staying here.
Yeah.
Which I think would make things poorer.
Right. It's an interesting dilemma. The other thing I think that could potentially be impacted by the problem if it happened in a modern day situation is that just technology is so much more prevalent now than it was. And we know technology doesn't work properly when you have a haunting. So, like, how do cell phones work? Like, do cell phone towers get messed up because somebody throws a source near it? Like,
Ooh.
I think that, like, the technological implications are really interesting because...
Yeah, like your Wi-Fi getting messed up might be the first sign that you've got a problem in the house.
Exactly. Or your, like, you know, your Ring, like, doorbell or whatever it is, you know? Like...
Oh, wouldn't that be creepy, though? There'd be all the pictures online. Like, look, my Ring kept going off at 2 a.m. There's a phantasm outside. Yeah.
Oh, my God. Yeah, that is... Is it ever discussed in the books if, like, ghosts can be captured on photographs?
It's never discussed, but I think if it was modern day, we would find a way to capture them in photographs.
Yeah, like, what if you could see them on, like, your iPhone camera, but you couldn't, like, see them to the naked eye? Or there was, like, apps that would help adults, like, try and see ghosts, but they wouldn't actually work very well, but there would be, you know, millions of them, and there would be all kinds of weird, like, that would be, like, the ghost device, like, ghost tracking apps, would be just, like, be big business, I imagine.
I think it'd be very interesting, actually. Once the problem really took off in a modern day setting, I think it would be hard to leave the UK, but I do think the rest of the world would be very interested in selling us lots of things. And creating ways, like creating like the goggles or stuff to see ghosts and things, actually. I think, yeah, that would be something. I could see all the tech bros in America being way into that.
If there's money to be made, the tech bros are into it. So, yes.
And also you get to feel good about yourself too, you know. I've invented something, I can have a name for myself, you know, I'm helping people, I'm saving lives. People would be, you know, overseas, I reckon people would really be investing a lot of money and time and research and development on this kind of stuff, whereas in Lockwood, London, they haven't. In the books they haven't, and I think because in the books it all stopped in the 70s and technology just wasn't that advanced. As technology has just come the last 10 years, the last 20 years alone, technology has just, it's been leaps and bounds, hasn't it?
Yeah, there is a technological theory that has, there's a name for the pace of technology that I cannot remember right now, but it basically says it increases exponentially, and that's really what we've seen in the past 10, 15 years in particular. And I think that we would definitely, if modern day Lockwood and Co, if, you know, the problem happened today, I think we would see that in a very dramatic scale.
Yeah.
So
I think we'd probably still have like agents, and their work would probably look much the same, I think. But supervisors would probably be able to at least see the ghosts because there'd be the technology to make that happen.
Right.
And there'd be people doing the research into technology to make it happen as well. Because I think one thing with Lockwood's world in the books is that these are people who kind of just, well, this is the way it is. This is the way it's always been. There's not much we can do about it. They're trying to make advances. But they're working from a base that's so much, like, that's just so far behind the starting line in a way. Whereas right now, kind of our attitude towards technology is that if we can't do it, it's not that it's impossible, it's that we can't do it yet.
Right. Like, I can see some, you know, tech bros being like, we're going to use AI to come up with robots that are going to fight the ghosts. And I can also see, I just can't imagine that there wouldn't be, like, Netflix documentaries about the history of the problem and, like, following. What if there was, like, a reality show that followed around agents, and, like, I can just see it all.
I think agents would get really bad about that. Maybe like Fitz would be okay with that because they have big enough teams that they can protect the, like, filmmakers. But can you imagine, like, someone trying to follow Lucy with a camera? She'd be like, get out of the way!
Yeah, she would hate it. She would never agree, ever. But Lockwood would want to do it because it would be good publicity for the agency.
Until they almost get the camera crew killed and then think, maybe not.
Exactly. Well, I don't know about you, but I think that's a good place to wrap up this episode. I love that image of Lockwood and Co, the reality series. So. Well, this was super fun getting to go through so many questions. I don't know about you, but I'd be happy to do this again. So you should send us some more questions if you would like us to do this again in the future. Thank you so much for listening. You can find us on our website. You can also email us at hauntingthenarrativepod@gmail.com. We're on all the social media platforms, so please look us up and say hello.
Including Blue Sky. We're on Blue Sky.
Yes, we're on Blue Sky now. HTN podcast, so come and say hi. We love chatting with you all.
All right.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
Have a good
Bye.
night.